Emmy Göring called herself the First Lady of the Third Reich. She lived in a palace filled with 1,375 stolen masterpieces. She wore gowns sewn by concentration camp prisoners. She draped herself in jewelry taken from murdered families. But when the war ended and the Allies finally put her on trial, they did not charge her with war crimes. They charged her with something far more disturbing. And the verdict forces us to confront a question history still struggles to answer. When does ignorance become guilt? Before she became Emmy Göring, she was Emmy Sundman. She was not born into power. She did not grow up surrounded by wealth or political influence. She was a stage actress, moderately successful, well-reviewed, but never truly famous. For years, she performed in regional theaters across Germany, earning respectable applause but never breaking into the elite circles of Berlin's cultural world. She was talented, disciplined, and ambitious, but also aging in a profession that rewarded youth. By the early 1930s, she was already in her 40s, watching younger actresses take the roles she once hoped for. Then Hermann Göring noticed her. At the time, Göring was not just a powerful man, he was one of the most powerful men in Europe. Commander of the Luftwaffe, founder of the Gestapo, Hitler's closest ally. A man who embodied the Nazi regime's combination of violence, vanity, and unchecked authority. When Göring chose Emmy, her life changed overnight. Their wedding on April 10, 1935 was not a private affair. It was a state spectacle. Adolf Hitler himself served as best man and official witness. Fighter planes roared overhead in perfect formation. Thousands of spectators lined the streets of Berlin. The message was unmistakable. This was not merely a marriage, it was propaganda. Emmy Sundman, the provincial actress who had spent years auditioning for parts, had suddenly become Nazi royalty. Within months, she was hosting state banquets instead of rehearsals, shaping conversations instead of memorizing scripts, standing beside Europe's most feared men instead of performing before small-town audiences. And in December 1938, she made her loyalty official. She joined the Nazi Party. Her membership number was suspiciously low, backdated to 1932, as if she had been a committed believer from the beginning. It was a symbolic gesture, but a revealing one. Emmy wanted history to remember her not as someone who arrived late, but as someone who belonged. Hermann Göring built his wife a monument. He called it Carinhall, named after his first wife who had died years earlier. What began as a hunting lodge in the forests northeast of Berlin grew into something closer to a palace. Rare animals roamed the grounds. Servants attended to every whim. Guests arrived from across Europe. At the heart of Carinhall stood a 34-meter-long grand gallery. Its walls were covered with over 1,375 works of art. Paintings by Vermeer, Cranach, Renoir, Rubens. A collection that would have rivaled any major museum in the world. But not a single piece had been bought. Every painting had been stolen. During the Nazi occupation of Europe, approximately 600,000 artworks were seized from Jewish families. Some were taken from homes as their owners were dragged to deportation trains. Others were confiscated from galleries, vaults, and private collections. Many passed through the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris, which the Nazis converted into a warehouse for plundered Jewish art. Hermann Göring visited that warehouse more than 20 times. He walked through rooms stacked floor to ceiling with stolen masterpieces. He inspected them personally, and he selected what he wanted. Those paintings ended up on Emmy Göring's walls. She walked past them every day. She entertained guests beneath them. She posed for photographs with them behind her. The art was only part of it. Emmy Göring's wardrobe became legendary. She owned more haute couture than any woman in Europe. Silks, velvets, furs, shoes, jewelry. Her closets overflowed while the continent starved. At state events, she appeared draped in luxury. Diamonds heavy on her fingers, gold at her throat, gowns that would have taken a lifetime to acquire through legitimate means. What she later claimed was that she never knew where any of it came from. Her dresses were sewn by enslaved seamstresses in concentration camps. Her jewelry had been stripped from Jewish women before they were murdered. Her textiles had been looted from families that no longer existed. Each piece carried a history of theft and death. And yet, during her trial, Emmy would insist she had simply worn what her husband gave her. She never asked questions, never wondered, never suspected. But how do you not ask questions when you own the largest private wardrobe in Europe? How do you not notice when museum-quality art appears on your walls during a war defined by systematic robbery and extermination? Her defense relied on a claim of naivete so extreme it bordered on the absurd. And yet, it worked. On June 2, 1938, Emmy Göring gave birth to a daughter. She was 45 years old, considered unusually old for a first-time mother at the time. Hermann Göring was ecstatic. He named the child Edda. And to celebrate, he ordered 500 Luftwaffe fighter planes to fly over Berlin. 500 military aircraft roaring across the capital. Not for victory, not for defense, but for personal pride. The flyover was broadcast nationwide as propaganda. Hitler himself became the child's godfather. Photographs show the Führer holding the infant, Emmy beaming beside him, surrounded by the most powerful men in the Reich. This was the peak. Emmy Göring was the unofficial First Lady of Nazi Germany, mother to Hitler's goddaughter, mistress of a palace filled with stolen treasures. She believed herself untouchable. Her arrogance proved costly. Emmy openly despised Eva Braun. Eva Braun was hidden from the German public, but within Hitler's inner circle, she commanded quiet authority. Emmy refused to acknowledge it. She snubbed Eva at gatherings, treated her with visible contempt, made it clear she considered herself superior. This was not just social rivalry, it was insubordination. Hitler eventually intervened. He ordered Hermann Göring to correct his wife's behavior. Soon after, Emmy found herself banned from the Berghof, Hitler's private Bavarian retreat. The message was unmistakable. Her protection was gone. April 1945. The Third Reich was collapsing. As Soviet troops closed in on Berlin, Hermann Göring sent Hitler a telegram asking permission to assume leadership if the Führer became incapacitated. Hitler saw it as betrayal. His response was swift and merciless. Göring was stripped of all titles, expelled from the Nazi Party, and an order was issued: execute Hermann Göring, his wife Emmy, and their 7-year-old daughter. The family that had lived as royalty was now marked for death. Only the chaos of Germany's collapse saved them. American forces captured them before the SS could. Emmy Göring spent nearly 3 years in custody. Her husband was tried at Nuremberg, convicted of crimes against humanity, and sentenced to hang. On October 15, 1946, he swallowed a cyanide capsule in his cell. Emmy would face her own reckoning in 1948. Her denazification trial became a test case. How much did she know? Her defense portrayed her as a sheltered wife, an actress uninterested in politics, focused only on motherhood and appearances. Prosecutors disagreed. They pointed to her party membership, her unwavering loyalty, her decades spent surrounded by stolen wealth. The tribunal compromised. On July 21, 1948, Emmy Göring was convicted not as a war criminal but as a Nazi activist. Her sentence: 1 year in a labor camp already served, 30% confiscation of assets, a 5-year ban from performing, and then she walked free. The fall was brutal. The woman who once commanded 500 planes now lived in a cramped apartment without electricity or running water. She fought in court to recover her husband's property. She lost most of it. The art was gone, returned, reclaimed, or absorbed into museums. She never accepted responsibility. She wrote memoirs defending her husband, claimed persecution, maintained ignorance. She died in 1973, still insisting she had done nothing wrong. Her daughter Edda defended her father's legacy until her own death in 2018. When does living in denial become participation? How much stolen wealth does it take to make someone complicit? At what point does ignorance stop being a defense and become a confession? Emmy Göring walked through a palace of stolen lives. and she claimed she saw nothing. History is still deciding whether to believe her.